Greetings, Year 12. This is Lesson 2 of having a look at the coursework and what this means for you. We're going to have a look at the current affairs magazines, as this is going to be the sort of default option for you, given this time of interesting difficulty and the fact that you don't listen to radio and you can't make moving image stuff on your own. At least you can't make good moving image stuff on your own without any practice, but the government have denied you practice of that since GCSE and AS level. Well, that's just me complaining. However, greetings. Let's have a look at current affairs magazines, because that's where we're headed. Right, so let's have a look at this brief one more time, in case you haven't had a look at lesson 1, but do have a look at lesson 1 because it's full of details about what you need to include in the non-examined assessment, as they call it. So what we have here is the magazine brief that is your default, and with that we're looking to have one front cover and the content pages, if appropriate, for the first 2 editions, and then you've got the 2 pages of the website to go with it, ideally, well, definitely with some audio visual stuff to go on that page. Now we're going to have a look today at the proper kind of almost academic level, shall we say, of current affairs magazines. Current affairs magazines are aimed not at the target audience they're asking you for. If you look there at the bottom, they are asking you to have a socially conscious 16 to 25-year-old middle to upmarket demographic. Now that would indicate that these people are kind of ABC1, that they are educated, and the sort of people that read The Guardian. That kind of thing. You can have left-wing and right-wing current affairs magazines, but let's put it this way, boys and girls, we're doing the magazine, but 16 to 25-year-olds don't read magazines. I'll say it again. So let's have a look at what sort of things that they visually include in the magazine front covers and in the contents pages and on the websites that we can be aware of. And then your mission at the end of today's lesson will be to go and source one of these. Ideally you'll go and, I think our social distancing is still in place, but lockdown isn't in place, so you'll be able to go and get one of these publications. Get one at least one of these publications. They're about £6, so let's have a look at what sort of publications you might go and get. Right, current affairs magazines. Such well-known and well-respected titles as maybe The Economist, Newsweek, The Spectator. New Scientist has obviously a more scientific bent, but it is sort of news and current events in science, so it's a weekly magazine. You also have Time magazine in America, The New Statesman. If you type in current affairs magazines, you will see a range of these. It's just that none of them are aimed at 16 to 25-year-olds. But what we do need to be able to understand about these magazines is that these are the promise of insightful analysis of news and current affairs. Newspapers provide news, that immediate update of what has happened in the previous day and the previous day. Right? That's what it does. It's why it's called news. It's new news. But the idea is with current affairs magazines, they offer a deeper level of information. They offer insight. They tie together maybe the contexts around what has happened during the previous week. How does that tie to what's happened during the previous year or previous 10 years? And it will, of course, have this context and this deeper analysis on a much harder news agenda. So if we have a look at The Spectator, which is talking about Corbyn's Britain and its analysis of the policies of the ex-Labour leader and what he wanted for Britain in The Spectator. Again, it's hard news about politics, about the way of life in the country. If you have a look at The Economist, the next war, and they're looking at the potential chances of greater sort of military conflict between great world powers like Russia and America and China in a way that we've kind of thought doesn't exist anymore. You have sort of regional conflicts and proxy wars in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. Things like Time, they're dealing with other serious issues such as gun violence in America, school shootings, and then you've got a very iconic shot there of the victims, or the survivors, shall we say, of a particular school shooting. One thing we can say is that these front covers, as all front covers are a promise. They are a promise of information in the magazine to come if the educated ABC1 audience want to buy it, to go and get something they can't get anywhere else, that level of information. So these are still successful magazines in a world where you're sort of more working class or mass market magazines, the sort of celebrity goss and tattle. Those magazines like, I don't know, Now and Bella and stuff like that, they're going downhill. GQ, music, like fashion magazines, they are going downhill in terms of circulation and readership. Music magazines, definitely downhill in terms of circulation and readership. But these kind of magazines have actually seen a rise, and they've actually seen a rise over like maybe the last 3 or 4 years since Brexit, since President Donald Trump came to office in America, and the world went to hell in a handcart, and suddenly people wanted more information about how the world would be in a more meaningful way. Right, so that's the promise. Now we will go back into what these magazines offer their audiences more deeply. We will go into what these kind of magazines offer in terms of media language more deeply. But what you can say with these things is that they are definitely a thinking person's magazine, and they look like it. So let's have a look at the contents pages, because you're going to have to go and produce these. Here's one from Newsweek, here's also one from The Economist, and here's one from New Scientist. There's definitely a trend here. I don't know if you've noticed what this trend is, but this trend is black on white with small text and iconic images and pinstripes. They love a pinstripe. Alright, so what I would say here is that the contents pages are, again, guiding the audience into the deeper information in the book of the magazine. But they do this with quite short leading guidelines, not cell lines anymore. We have cell lines on a front cover, but they're guiding the audience into particular page numbers in the book. And they've got a very ordered layout. What I would say with these is they do have this very iconic photography, and that's going to be one of the challenges that you will face when you have to go and make your current affairs magazine. Now, we'll have a look at how we can try to overcome this. Maybe using some kind of iconic image yourself, or some sort of drawn stuff or repurposed photography that we can use. But all of your stuff has to be original photos. The good news is you don't actually have to have lots of images on one of these contents pages. They're not conventional. It's not conventional to make it look absolutely banging and super exciting with loads of images. However, the ones that you do have need to be meaningful, and the way that you write those guidelines, those lines that introduce the audience into the stories in the book, are kind of well written and quite snappy. So that's going to be a challenge for you, and that's why I'm going to be getting you guys to get at least one copy of one of these current affairs magazines for your homework task after this. Now let's have a look at the websites. The websites will continue the branding that you've seen on the front covers and through to the contents pages, and they will have this modern stylistic approach, and with that you'll see black on white or white on black for the websites. But that's partly a functional thing, that you need to have a high contrast website that can be viewed on someone's, say, smartphone or tablet, wherever they are. So that's important. You'll have these key sort of headlines and these sort of bylines about who the article's by, and then these iconic images. Again, you can see here that you've got the drawing in the top left hand corner. That's in this very sort of artsy style about the police officer in front of the black person, which is sort of symbolic of the story beneath it, which is the Minneapolis riots, with coronavirus and Trump's failure to see a crisis coming, that we've seen in the news around now. That is a standard kind of convention, to have iconic images, even photography that's very iconic against something, or hand-drawn things that are very iconic against something. When I mean something, I mean a story or a cell line. Okay, and so there's going to be, I feel, in your future at some level, some use of drawing or some use of symbolism to help communicate a story in a way that maybe if you were doing, say, fashion or entertainment, you just get photography of the thing. This one's going to need you to be a bit more creative with how you visualize a current affairs story or issue to head up your coverage of it. Now, the next thing that we have is something that's a bit more ordered and arguably about as difficult as they come, which is The Economist. Now, The Economist here, I've left this one here, but I'll pop this one to you on the on a share on Show My Homework. But again, with this one, you can see it's got this very clear sense of branding. If you have a look at The Economist front cover that we've got from the previous slide, and then this, it always retains that very strong The Economist in the top left hand corner, that kind of red background, white foreground color of the sort of serifed font that you've got there. Very ordered layout on this website, where you've got these sort of columns and a great deal more information there in terms of like a range of stories, and again iconic images against each one of these things. I would argue that you're not going to have to make something as ordered as this, but even the use of things like squares and rectangles and a limited color palette, so it has this kind of grey, green, blue and a slightly faded version of that color as a sort of primary and secondary that sort of works against the red of The Economist. Very limited in terms of like red, grey, green, blue, black, white. Like, it's a very limited palette, and that gives it a sense of order and a sense of style and a sense of seriousness throughout. And the use of those blocks and squares again orders the information, makes it easily accessible to an educated audience. So those are the things we're going to go and look to do, or some element of it, because you guys have got an audience that are 16 to 25, and you might want to do something with a little bit more pizzazz. Maybe you're going to do stuff that's going to be issues that are affecting to 16 to 25 year olds, right? So in that case, you might be looking to have something with a bit more punch, and for that reason I'd say maybe have a look at things like the stories that they have on Vice. That's a really good place to have a look for youth news. Right, so this is the point where I get you to go and do a task, and that task is to get a copy of The Economist or The Spectator or The New Statesman. They're all popular within this country. What else could you get? You could also go and get yourself a copy of The New Scientist. That's a bit of an outlier because it's more sort of science, current affairs, but any of those will do for you. And what I would say to you, first of all, they're important for two reasons. First of all, read it. The Economist and The New Scientist are two of my favourite publications, and this is in a world of sort of TED Talks and Joe Rogan and stuff that I've been living in for coronavirus lockdown at home. But it's really important stuff that is going to raise your game. Now, that's going to be important because you're going to understand sort of where this fits and sort of level they're pitching at. And there are, smart 16 to 25 year olds will totally hack reading The Economist. What I would say to you is we can then look at especially the contents pages, which there aren't many of online, and have a look at how they pitch their contents pages and those guidelines into the book, and having at least one example of how you can use things like alliteration or puns or other intertextual cultural references is really useful. So go and get them if you can. If not, try and download them. But the contents pages are the thing that's hard to get. There's lots of front covers available online, and what we'll do next lesson is we'll have a look at what is going to be in those front covers, and then we're going to start to, with any luck, over the next few weeks I will get you onto some sort of Photoshop lessons with me. Right, so that kind of concludes lesson 2. Go and get those current affairs magazines if you can. What I would say to you is I will be feeding back to you guys on your explain big issue questions in the week to come. But other than that, stay safe and make sure you're doing all your work as best you can. It would be nice to see a few more of you doing it, because this exam, it be coming, and you want to get yourselves a good grade. Alright, well, have a lovely time in the good weather. Ta-ta.